Hello and welcome to the FinTech Finance Virtual Arena. I'm Doug Mackenzie, the co-host of the show, and today we're going to be looking at real-time payments and how the industry, especially in the payment sector, is modernizing. So I'm really interested to see how the banks are adapting to this more innovative and really quite exciting payment system. So joining me today, I've got Dean Wallace from ACI Worldwide and Gábor Bujáki from OTP Bank. Guys, thank you so much for joining us here today on the session. To kick things off, I kind of want to get a bit of introductions from you both. So Dean, if I could kick off with you, how are you doing today?
Not bad, thanks very much. Looking forward to the end of this lockdown. Hopefully the end's in sight.
It does seem like it's coming towards the end of it, doesn't it? And Dean, with that in mind, could you also give our audience a bit of background to yourself as well, and also ACI Worldwide if they haven't heard of you?
Sure, yeah. So I work for ACI Worldwide. We are a software and solutions provider in the world of real-time payments. Been in the industry for over 40 years now, so a little bit of a household name in that respect. The segment that I support within ACI Worldwide is what we call the banks and intermediaries. So consumer banks, retail banks, merchant acquirers, PSPs, financial intermediaries like processors. I've been at the company, I'm coming to the 9th year now. Prior to that, I've worked for consultancies, I've worked for large software houses before, and also a credit card processor. So kind of know the industry reasonably well, not as well as the man you're about to introduce though, but I'm hopefully we can have a good conversation today.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Dean. And Gábor, how are you doing?
Hi, thank you very much. Welcome, everyone, from the not so sunny Budapest. I'm fine, thank you. And I'm talking on the OTP side. We are the Hungarian most biggest bank on this global market size and on payments level as well. Thus, we are most important goal for now that we want to have a bigger market share on international level, cross-border payments, and generally looking forward the future technologies of payments and payment-related topics. So we are very happy to take participation in this discussion with you.
Amazing. Well, thank you again as well for joining. I'm so excited to hear the Central European kind of looking out expansion kind of wise when it comes to the payment sphere, because cross-border there is very, very exciting, and the payments ecosystem in Hungary as well is also looking very brilliant. So guys, thanks so much. Now, to get the start, to kind of get the background to the conversation, Dean, if I could come to you, please. Can I get from your perspective what would you say has been the biggest instigator when it comes to payment innovations in recent years? Do you think it's either been customer expectation, new market players, or has it just really been an industry-wide push to finally start innovating?
I remember when I first started working at ACI, so like I said, 9 years ago, and the word we had on our tongue a lot was disruption. And at the time, it felt like there was a lot of market forces really trying to drive that disruption, and so we were predicting the disruption coming. And then I think the last few years we've been in the eye of the storm. So key trends that really changed things: consumer expectation of everything at your fingertips immediately, so real time, but then digital, so specifically mobile. I mean, we say digital and that incorporates things like, televisions and watches, but it's mainly mobile. Mobile phones are the computing devices that we all use the most.
Yeah.
And so I think those two trends of real time and digital have really driven the expectation. And then that's had a knock-on effect into, say, the banking and payments environment. And I think over the last year, obviously, COVID has really sped that up a lot. And so when we've been seeing traction, we're now seeing enormous amounts of traction. So for me, those are the main themes I've seen the last few years to really drive change.
Yeah. And Gábor, I'd love to hear your perspective as well. I mean, hearing that kind of almost revolutionary market talk there from Dean, do you agree?
Yes, of course. We met only electronic payment solutions in the merchants' requirements, and they also want to have QR code scanning solutions, and they want to have the next step with connecting devices and payment solutions. So the simple techniques is for now it's enough, but after 1 or 2 years later, the usage of electronic and contactless payments need to have a significant IT development, and I think that the cooperation between banks, acquirers, and the ecosystem players should be cooperate strongly in the future, and maybe divided again the market somehow. So I think this online payments and quick payments, different kind of payments are really will restructure the payment ecosystem in the future.
I think it is brilliant to hear these kind of two perspectives in terms of, Dean, you talking about how the technology has kind of facilitated this demand, and Gábor, you're talking about how customer demand for new technologies is still fueling this revolution. For instance, with the QR code, we are seeing real-time payments thoroughly being modernized in various different ways. Now we've seen this huge, rapid innovation in payments. We've seen real-time payments in, I think it's close to 50 markets now. So Gábor, if I could come to you, I'm really interested to see how critical it is for banks across the world to actually get access to the real-time payments, especially when kind of looking at even just cross-border payments. How critical is real-time going to be for a bank like OTP?
We don't have problems with real-time payments because we follow the regulations, and maybe the KYC processes is the most difficult issue in these questions, but I think we prepared for the instant payment or the real-time payment transfers, and technically we follow the expectations of the current situation, which regarded and boosted by the COVID and the pandemic situation. So we see that these parts of the payment industry is covered by us properly in the Hungarian market, that we really have a big step in front of us is the cross-border structure development and becoming an international real cross-border bank by Hungarian Eastern Europe Center, which will be really challenging for us in this term of the legal and the payment regulations are much more challenging for us. The Hungarian market is very very good, so it's not a difficult situation.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to hear that perspective. And then, Dean, if I could come to you, then talking about how critical it is. We've now heard from both of you about how this customer demand is there for it. It's almost critical. And Gábor was just talking there about how the market in Hungary is kind of perfect for its implementation. But for the banks that might not have got access to it yet, how critical will it be for them to get it in the next couple of years?
Oh, I mean, I think Hungary is a great example because it was a mandate that the banks had to put in place real-time payments, and with real-time payments, they were also doing open banking, so you had to open up access to the account through API. You also had, with the second or third release, you had request to pay capabilities as well. And so, in essence, the Hungarian market, in a very quick move, went straight to real-time and digital modernized infrastructure. Now, all the banks had to go with it, and so in other markets, it's not been mandated. Not always. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's not. I think it's important. I think for the banks, often because that's where the demand's coming from, and so it's about modernizing their offerings. Because if they don't modernize their offerings, then somebody else comes along and they modernize their offerings, and they'll start losing customers. Now, a lot of the big banks, clearly they've got more to lose than they've got to gain. So for them, it's about defending. It's a defensive maneuver, but they can also use it to then go and attack a market share in other banks as well. So often these new capabilities, in fact, the real-time capabilities are not traditional sort of card setup capabilities. They're very much, how do you do something which replaces a plastic setup and do something which is unique with a digital wallet or some form of, the likes of Google Pay, for example, that they've provided something there which leapfrogs having to use a card and go straight to the account. Yeah. And so I think for those banks that are supporting that from a consumer perspective, it's clearly something that they're going to need to do, because if they don't, somebody else will and they'll lose market share. On the acquiring side, the merchants themselves, there's benefits there about quicker settlement processes, so they can lower the costs of settlement, lower the costs of reconciliation, also potentially lower fees as well. So there's definitely some key benefits to do it in a lot of the markets which we're seeing globally at the moment.
Dean, and do you have a vision of the next 5 or 10 years, how it looks like the payment ecosystem and the payments world, and do you have some idea how you imagine the couple of next years? It would be interesting what the outcomes you expect from the perspective of now you see.
I mean, so Gábor, I think that's a great question. I certainly think that, I think one of the largest card schemes, MasterCard, yes. I've just named, I think they do a great job of kind of talking about where the strategy is headed globally. They talk about payments choice. And I think right now for the next sort of 5, 10, 15 years, depends on the market, I think we're going to see choice. So what we're seeing now, and some markets are going faster than others, is how do you make sure there is actual choice? So is it a card? Is it a plastic? Is it a real-time transaction? Is it a pseudo virtual wallet? And I think that each market will move at different paces. Some markets are mandating that it has to happen. If I think about some of the Asian markets, they mandate a real-time payments with request to pay, with digitization, and they mandate it like Hungary have. And we're seeing a large on-ramp of activity. Other markets, like say the US, they've been live with real-time payments for 4 years now, and that's still very much a credit card market. But FedNow is coming in the next 2 years, and that's going to create digital capabilities as well. So we're starting to see markets are going at different paces. So I think one thing's for sure: the next 10 years are going to be very interesting globally, and we're going to see different setups in different markets. But I think if we flash forward further into the future, I do see some consolidation and convergence of those capabilities. And I think those that are investing now are those that'll benefit in the next 10 years. I think if those who are sitting back and waiting will then be on a very difficult trajectory to try and catch up.
Yeah, and Gábor, I'd like to hear your perspective on that as well, because you were telling us about OTP looking at actually QR codes as well to implement into Hungary. So, I mean, what's your vision of the future?
We saw that there is the payment itself, and the merchant should choose which type of tools and which type of solutions want to use, and we want to take part as many solutions as it possible. So we see that in the Hungarian market, concentrated on currently the POS terminals market and the regular transfers, but the future techniques are here. So we want to prepare for the future requirements of the customers and even the corporate side on the merchants level. So we want to have all the possibility, some kind of way that we could offer the merchants all kind of payment solutions.
Yeah, and that kind of just resonates really, that whole aspect of choice.
Yes,
how critical
the whole spectrum of the payments. We want to have a possibility to develop our sales product scale. So we don't want to limit ourselves regarding just only paying by bank card or just regular payment. So we are working very hard on these solutions as well.
Nice. Now, speaking of, Dean, you were bringing up a kind of looking at it from a global perspective now, rather than just a European one. And I think probably one of the biggest international standards in the payment sector recently is going to be ISO 20022. And so I'm really interested, Dean, then your perspective when it comes to what that impact is going to be on cross-border payments.
I was funny, Gábor and I were chatting about this earlier. The thing about cross-border payments is there's almost two types. There's the type which Gábor's kind of managing right now, which is about how do you make e-commerce transactions go cross-border. So you could probably touch on that. From a corporate perspective, business to business, there's certainly how do you get transactions moving from one border to another. Now, the ISO 20022 is a standard which enables the sharing of that rich data. So you can use that rich data to kind of mine and understand your customers and your processes a lot better than you could before. I'm not the expert to kind of say exactly how you do that. I'm sure there are data scientists out there a lot more clever than I, but I do understand the commercial reality, which is having more data means more ability to mine and to market and to learn and improve by getting access to that data. And if that data is standardized as well, there's lower costs of processing transactions as well. So I think that's certainly a direction where we're seeing globally that kind of interoperability. I think in Europe, clearly it's all one market, single market anyway, but we are seeing in other markets like across Asia, for example, some of the real-time payment systems providers there are agreeing how they can exchange transactions cross-border using their own real-time rails. So no global scheme, no global sort of a card rail, but very much a localized, interconnected, faster ACH instead. So I think it's important for that reason, because you have to have those standards and the rich data.
Yeah, I've heard some really interesting stories from how that increased data is going to really help businesses, for instance, be able to send data, just not just the kind of payment data, but also send invoicing data and everything through that channel as well. And so, Gábor, coming onto the e-commerce side of things, I'd love to hear how ISO 20022 will impact the bank in that regard. Then.
Yes, this is very challenging for us as well. And furthermore, the KYC processes and other regulations and IT development needs following up these questions are really hard to follow in the market, because the structure requires strongly developed IT and legal fulfillment of the regulations. So yes, we are working hard on this international level to develop our markets, and in the Hungarian level as well.
Interesting. Now, I'm kind of interested in what will be the cold hard benefits once you kind of fully standardize onto the standard. Then, Gábor, what do you see as the benefits coming from this standard?
The globalization effect is to every player is one positive, and advantage is has a strong advantage of every market player.
I wonder, Gábor, obviously Doug's asked the question about ISO 2022, but the realm of cross-border e-commerce payments, let's be fair, data is important, but it's more about the experience. It's the customer experience that I think, I don't know if you'd agree with that, Gábor, but certainly when I talk to e-commerce vendors in the marketplace, the merchant acquirers and PSPs, they very much talk about it's the experience. Experience trumps anything. Now, data is important, but ISO 22 is more of like a rail discussion, whereas e-commerce is much more about the customer experiences. Is that a fair comment?
Yes, of course, absolutely agree. Absolutely.
Well, with that in mind, then, I'm kind of then interested in seeing how, Dean, maybe if you could touch on, we've already touched on how kind of the banks that don't get access to those real-time payment rails, are the banks that don't look at these newer payment trends going to actually be on an extinction level event? Is that really where we're heading? Because ultimately, a bank is designed to be just mitigating risk. Now, all these innovations are coming hard and fast. Are we actually going to get to the point where if a bank doesn't look at these innovations, they might start losing relevancy?
It'd be so tempting to say yes and go with the flow on that one, but I'm going to give a more of a considered response. The reality is, any bank who I've spoke to around the world, more or less, are already either moving in the direction of real time or are on it. Now, I've met a few in certain markets that will go nameless, who still do challenge the why would I bother? What's the point? What's the business case? That was certainly years ago. That was a discussion that used to come up a lot. What's the business case? But I think the banks are moving. The challenge you've got most often is that the larger the bank, the more spaghetti they've got, the more kind of kludged together systems that are integrated with some kind of subroutines with another kind of programming language doing something to help them out. And so there's quite a lot of that goes on. And that's where doing things in real time often cause challenges for banks who are very much used to doing things in batch. I think some of the challenger banks who start off, the digital natives, they're real time by design, but where they've got the nimbleness of being brand new or white space, what they don't have is the large pool of customers that the traditional banks have got. So I think in terms of the banks doing it, I think they are. The challenge is at what pace, and do they have the right technology which actually helps them get into the market in a way that allows them to reuse what they've already got, to scale so they can be ready for any kind of spikes in activity, and they can actually integrate digitally natively so that whatever they're doing is something they can plug in, play and change whenever they need to pretty quickly and flexibly. So that's more the challenges I think that we're seeing in the marketplace right now.
Yeah. Now, with that in mind, Gábor, as well, being one of the largest banks in Hungary, do you feel like innovation is embraced at all levels of the bank, and is that something? I mean, I was already really impressed when you brought up the QR code notion. Is OTP kind of following on that innovative suite?
We are working on a lot of innovation on the payment methods, and our team is strongly cooperated with the universities and the future technologies in the level that they find out which possible is fit to the banking strategy the most, and which will be available to fulfill the challenges on the payment requirements. So we have a payment excellence team as well in the Hungarian international market. So we regularly follow the market expectations as well. But of course, on IT level, our team working on, for example, robotics and other kind of solutions that also may be connected to this payment area, not strongly, but even future technologies are also connected somehow in that level. So we try to follow all relevant payment-related topics in the market.
With that in mind then, Dean, as well, talking about all these innovations, we've talked about, you've brought up how some of these markets in Asia, for instance, have incredible kind of innovative payment offerings, whether it be mandated by regulatory issues or just through customer demand. Are we going to start seeing some of these real-time payment schemes actually kind of become interoperable? Is that something, or are we always going to see some areas of the world just far more innovative when it comes to payments? Do you think we're going to start seeing them talk together?
Oh, definitely. I think it's an absolute given. Certainly, some of the global schemes I've talked to the last few years, they know the challenge that they're biting into, and so they've launched a brand new scheme, central scheme, connecting in lots of banking players. And on the periphery, it looks straightforward. I'm going to set up a new system, people are going to plug in, but it's so much more than that. There's different transaction types, testing, certification. There's a lot of risk. You're moving money around, and so they've all pretty much started the same vein, which is get the basics right first. Initially, it used to be about just the credit transfer. Now it's the credit transfer with request to pay on top and person to person, and so. But they've all done it with the thought process of, well, we're doing it for domestic reasons, but you get more benefits when you then go cross-border. And so I do know a lot of the guys at that level, of the kind of executive level, and those institutions do talk about how can they make that work. And if you look at Europe, for example, Europe with SEPA Inst, that is already a sort of a pan-European setup. If you look at P27, what they're doing in the Nordics, 4 separate markets connecting with 4 different currencies, 4 different settlement cycles, they're also looking to do it. Down in Asia, we've got, I think it's Malaysia, and I think it might be Singapore or Thailand. Actually, it's Malaysia and Thailand interconnecting, and they're actually sending transactions cross-border as well. Wow. So that it's already started to happen. But will it happen to a point where everything comes together? The only thing that's missing there really is a single commercial entity pulling it all together. If you think about the likes of Visa, MasterCard, JCB, and China Union Pay, they, from a cards perspective, they started in one market, then grew out and just kept connecting in more kind of connection points to create a global network. The difference with the real-time payments is it's been set up domestically, independently, and now they're starting to connect up. So we're probably looking at another 10 years or so for it to really start to see that global interconnectivity. But I hasten to add, I'm no crystal ball person. We have to, what's a fortune teller? We have to see actually what happens. But I do think we may see it happen sooner in some markets rather than others. Certainly where trade borders are already lowered to enable that interconnectivity.
And can I ask, Gábor, in terms of what the kind of real-time payments modernization is going to look for, for instance, the merchants that kind of already bank with you guys, and kind of the actual business cases. How are businesses going to see payments modernized for them, rather than looking at the banking kind of infrastructure side of things on a day-to-day basis for your customers?
The first payment type is the transfer. That it is currently in Hungary is real time, and within a couple of seconds the partner gets the money. And our other focus is being on the POS terminals with bank cards. Is also technically meaning it's a real time paying with contactless solution. Currently, we are working on web-based payment solutions as well, which means POS terminals converted into soft POS and not physical version of the payment, but in e-commerce is also became possible to pay electronically in a very real-time format. So we're working on this structure and selling this type of payments currently, which are all type of payments close to real time. We can provide to the customers these solutions.
Absolutely brilliant, yeah, and I think that's kind of you've touched on a point there, which has kind of been the elephant in the room, in that fact that the pandemic has made all these kind of innovations ever more important. Being able to have small medium enterprises being able to pay contactless, and also having that transparency and the speed. And Dean, I think we'll start wrapping up, but how do you think that the pandemic has it kind of accelerated some of these kind of innovations and modernization we've seen in real-time payments?
Oh, definitely. I think first of all, I think real-time payments, you can't accelerate the implementation of a new system any faster, but what you can do is accelerate its adoption curve.
Yeah.
And so I think we have seen more adoption because we are seeing more digital transactions between us. So it's actually digital, which is driving the adoption. Internet banking back 10, 15 years ago was driving faster payments in the UK. And then across the world now, it's mobile payments. It's being able to kind of access an account through an API. It's being able to embed it into your other customer journeys and experiences that drive a payment through a digital transaction. So I think with COVID, that has definitely kind of sped things up. I think it's also created new habits. I think consumers before, where they'd be a bit more skeptical, have then gone with it because it was easier while they were in lockdown or whatever. And now they've got the point where they're going out shopping again, and they're like, why can't I use my phone to do this? And so I think we're seeing a lot more traction in that direction now, that I think if it hadn't been for COVID, it would have taken a few more years. I do feel like we've accelerated quite a bit, actually.
Yeah. And Gábor, can I hear about the Hungarian market? Do you think that's brought together, fueled the innovation and maybe opened up the borders a bit when it comes to payment rails? Obviously, I know the SEPA is there, but do you think the pandemic has certainly shifted the innovation side of things at OTP and the rest of Hungary?
Yes, we see the same, that in the merchants who was working in the personal commerce previously, they have to switch on the e-commerce and electronic payments, and it was a rapid change of the payment industry. And maybe this situation, this pandemic situation, positive effect that may not happen now, or maybe much later can happen, that the digital development step in the payments industry, and not just the payment industry, that moreover the IT industry, because working from home and the commerce with the online commerce instead of the personal purchasing is developed a lot the past couple of months while we are in this situation regarding this pandemic.
Yeah, and I think really, guys, I think that's all we have time for, but it's so interesting to hear all these innovations and how, you know, maybe 5-10 years ago it would have been something that we're talking about as a very future crystal ball, Dean, I think you mentioned, but as you said as well, these are actually innovations. Both of you have brought innovations that are currently actually being put into practice, which I think is absolutely brilliant here in the payments industry. So thank you both for your time, and also thank you to our viewers as well. You can catch the rest of the series and much more over at www.fintechf.com, and of course YouTube and LinkedIn, where I'll see you in the comments. But guys, thank you very much for joining us here today. I hope you've had a good time, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Gábor.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.